This lesson is going to focus on number comparison. So whenever you're using filters, using if, pass, similar things where we're doing a comparison, you have certain values that you can use for that comparison. So in this lesson, we're going to be going over the number version of this. So this is any value whose state is a number-based value. So we're just going to focus on the filter part of this, and we just have a quick reaction set up here where we're just going to concentrate on a number-based value, which in this case is a particular skill in this VCC connection called customer service. And what I mean by comparison is all the values here. So again, we're focusing on the numbers. So the only things that'll show up, you'll see some grayed out values here. WFA knows the type of comparison that it's doing. So in this case, it's doing a number. So we have the values of is not, is less than, is more than, is or more than, and the various ones here. And we will go through these to also show an example. So you see Slack over here. We're going to change these values, and then we're just going to have a reaction that gets the current time, and we're going to send a Slack message with the current time just to sort of have a timestamp on the examples. So as you can see them scrolling, they'll make more sense and not get so clouded. So we're going to start with the top one. And we'll kind of group is not, is less than, as you get used to, like, as we go through some of these should all start to make sense. So we're just going to look at is not, is less than, and we'll run through a couple here so you can see. So we're just going to say is 5. So the only time this will trigger is if the state for causing Q for this particular skill is 5. Okay, so this is saved. And I'm going to have a tab here where I'm doing a store states. This is a Whendu built-in action. We'll go through these in a different lesson. But for now, just know that the session GUID of this is for this stream for this skill. So we'll put that in there, and the state that I want to change is calls in queue, and we're going to change the value here. So we're going to say is 5. So we'll change this to 5 and execute. Then you can see that this updated. So we did trigger this reaction because we set it to 5. So we're going to go back and we will change the state to 8. And you can see that nothing happened, nothing triggered. We will change it back to 5. Now you can see it triggered. So the really important part and lesson to take from this is every time the value refreshes. So anytime we set the value, it's going to evaluate this and trigger any of the reactions that's based on that. So we're saying is 5. So we're saying exactly 5. So if I go back and we say 5, you'll see this reaction trigger each time. So think of things like calls and queue. If it's flowing naturally through your VCC connection, however often in the background that it updates, anytime that that value comes back as 5, it's going to trigger that reaction. So it's really important to know which comparison to use in this case. So if you do want your reaction to trigger every time the value is 5, regardless of whether it was 5 last time and when it updates 5 again, you want to trigger that, then it's just you need to understand that. So because it's going to continue to trigger that, all your reactions for that will trigger it again. So let's go back to the comparison and we'll say is more than 5. Finish, we'll save, come back here, we'll say 5. You see it didn't do anything. We'll queue it again, nothing. Now we'll set it to 10. Then you can see it triggered. And we'll set it to 2. You'll see that it did not. So based on that, I just really want to emphasize how the reactions will work, because as you design your reactions, you'll probably find that there's only certain times you want to trigger it, even though the value matches. You may not want to trigger it every time. So we'll go back and we'll look at this. And so the examples I showed so far, so we're talking is, so that's a match. Also understand that there's a difference between is and the string matches. Okay, so is for number values and also for Boolean values. So you can put true if the type is a Boolean, is false. So we'll concentrate on the numbers here. So we say is not, is less than, is more than, is or more than. So anytime you need to use exact values, or just make sure it's not a particular number, or less than a number, or more than a number, and then you have equals, equal to, or more than, and less than. Now, those, through this example should all make sense on how that's going to work. So I won't go through an example of each one of those, but I do want to really stress on these two right here. So a lot of times you'll be probably using this because it will take a value and say, once it crosses these thresholds, do not trigger this reaction again until it falls back below that. So this is more than likely the use case. So things like reskilling, like most of the time it'll be, hey, if causing Q is over 10, I want to add some folks to a particular skill to help answer some of these calls. And then once it goes beneath that, I want to remove those. Now, if you had it as one of these other ones where it's like is or more than, any time that that value for causing Q refreshes and it is passing that test, it will trigger that. So you're probably not going to want to use is or is more than for things like reskilling, because each time that value refreshes and it's over that value, it's going to try to reskill those agents again. So in those cases, that's where we'd want to lean on something like crosses threshold above. So we'll say crosses threshold above 5. And we'll finish and we'll save. And now we'll go back to set the value, and it's currently 2. We'll say 10. And you see the reaction trigger there. So we're going to go in, and now we're going to say 15. Nothing. 100. No trigger. Now we'll go down to 2, which would be underneath that threshold. Now let's go 100. Now you see the reaction trigger. So the way crosses threshold above and below is once it does that and passes that, it's only going to do that once until it comes back under or over whichever one you're using there, and then trigger it. So we're at 100, and let's go back. So the inverse of that is below. We'll save that. We're at 100. Now let's go to 2. You saw the reaction trigger. And we'll go, well, actually, you can go higher. We'll say 3. It did not trigger because we have not gone, in this case, when we're saying below, we have not crossed over it and then back under. So let's go to 10. Now we'll go down to 2. And you can see that it triggered. So we've done is, we've done is more than. Understand that, again, whenever that refreshes for those is and is more and less than, those will all trigger every time it refreshes and it matches. Crosses threshold above and below will only trigger once until it goes on the other side of it and then back over or under, whichever one applies here. So the last one we'll focus on here is, it's actually probably rarely used, but we're going to go over it. We're going to say changes is more than 5. Now, the way this works is any change you make based on the previous value, if that change is more than 5 or less than, and in this case, we're using 5, is more than whatever value you put in it. And then also you have the inverse of that is less than. So it's looking at the previous value that you had it as, and then what you set the new one to, and makes that comparison. And if it's basically, it would be something you'd use if you want to be alerted if a number really jumps. So like, if calls in queue or something in this case would be 5, and then all of a sudden it went like to 15, you want to alert on something like that. When it really jumps like that, then it would be alerted. So we're going to say changes more than 5. So anytime this jumps up more than 5, so we'll just run 2, and now we will do 10. You can see that triggered. So now we're at 10. Let's go 12, which would be a change of 2. This should not trigger. It did not. Let's go up to 20. And you can see it triggered. Same for less than. So any change that results in a less than 5 difference will trigger this reaction. Nothing. And then we'll go, and you can see that triggered.